It started with a show of strength, or at least that's how it was meant to look. The US got what it wanted. Canada pulled back a planned digital tax just hours before it was to take effect, erasing over $7 billion in potential revenue. To many, it looked like a clean victory for Trump. But beneath the headlines and high fives in Washington, a more complex story was unfolding, one with far reaching implications, not just for trade, but for national identity, global energy markets, and the evolving definition of economic sovereignty. Canada's retreat on the digital services tax may have seemed like a concession, but it was also a calculated pause. Former Canadian central banker turned Prime Minister Mark Carney appeared to be playing a longer game, one that emphasized resilience and diversification over short term optics. By withdrawing the tax at the last moment, Canada avoided an immediate trade war while keeping strategic options open. It was less about surrender and more about sidestepping a trap. The move wasn't without sacrifice. Billions in projected tax revenue disappeared at a time when Canada faced significant fiscal strain from underfunded defense needs to mounting healthcare costs. But Carney and his allies appeared more interested in preserving negotiating leverage than collecting immediate income. It was a reset, not a retreat. And that reset pointed in a new direction away from the US and toward the world. For decades, Canada's economy has revolved around its southern neighbor. More than 75% of Canadian exports flow to the United States. But that dependency has long been a strategic vulnerability. Trump's trade brinksmanship, unpredictable, personal, and often theatrical, only reinforced that risk. Now, with LNG exports on the horizon and global demand for energy rising, Canada has an opportunity to redraw the map. Canada's first liquefied natural gas export terminal, located in Kitimat, British Columbia, officially came online on July 1st, symbolically Canada Day. It wasn't just a logistical milestone, it was a declaration of independence. With more than 7 additional LNG projects in development, some led by indigenous communities with billion-dollar stakes, Canada is moving quickly to become a significant global energy supplier. This shift not only expands the nation's economic base, but also marks a broader pivot toward Asia, Europe, and the global South. For Carney's administration, this isn't just economic policy, it's economic defense. The idea is simple: reduce vulnerability to American whims by building new ties, developing new infrastructure, and embracing Canada's role as a resource superpower. And there's a historical parallel here. In the 1970s, Pierre Trudeau's government began looking eastward, trying to shake off the gravitational pull of Washington. Today's effort echoes that approach, but comes with more urgency and far higher stakes. Trump's aggressive tactics may have helped catalyze something few expected: a cultural and emotional shift among Canadians. According to polling data released just a day before Canada's LNG launch, national pride had surged. Nearly half of Canadians reported feeling prouder of their identity, while an overwhelming majority expressed growing distrust toward the US and its leadership. This isn't just political fatigue, it's a redefinition of alignment. And perhaps most telling, nearly 3/4 of Canadians now say they will avoid traveling to the US altogether. It's a silent boycott, one not driven by official policy, but by personal conviction. This quiet exodus from cross-border engagement is a telling sign that diplomacy isn't the only thing unraveling, so is cultural proximity. For Canadian consumers, the economic fallout is becoming more tangible. Auto dealerships in provinces like Ontario and Quebec are reporting significant declines in sales of US-made vehicles. This isn't just about tariffs, though. Those have surged to 25% and beyond. It's also about trust. Buyers worry that warranties may not be honored, that prices will continue to rise, and that future purchases could become hostages in yet another round of trade warfare. On the steel front, the pain is even more acute. Over 90% of Canadian steel is exported to the US. And with new tariffs in place, factories are shuttering and jobs are disappearing. The Canadian Steel Producers Association warns that once blast furnaces shut down, they rarely start back up. Towns built around steel production like Sault Ste. Marie now face an existential threat. There's no contingency plan for a post-industrial collapse. In response, Ottawa has begun to circle the wagons. Procurement rules now prioritize domestic steel. Import quotas target low-cost metals from countries outside free trade agreements. But none of it addresses the underlying problem: when one trading partner can destroy an entire sector with a tweet, stability becomes impossible. Carney's team has set a July 21st deadline for negotiations. If no agreement is reached, Canada could retaliate with its own set of counter tariffs. And that's where things could escalate from policy dispute to full-scale economic conflict. The challenge is not just restoring trade, but rebuilding trust. And then there's the auto industry, perhaps the most integrated sector in North American trade. Canadian exports of vehicles to the U.S. dropped nearly 23% in April alone. Meanwhile, U.S. consumers are paying significantly more for the same vehicles, with average annual costs rising by $1,300 according to independent analysts. Production forecasts are being slashed, buyers are holding off, and uncertainty has gripped the entire supply chain. This isn't just a consequence of poor diplomacy, it's a failure of vision. Trump's administration promised jobs and prosperity through economic nationalism. Instead, it has delivered chaos. Delays at ports, shortages of key components, and rising costs have shaken one of the most reliable manufacturing ecosystems in the world. American automakers are watching market demand evaporate, and Canadian workers are waiting to see if their plants survive the summer. There's a troubling irony here. Trump wants to bring jobs back to America, yet his policies are pushing foreign consumers, especially Canadians, toward alternatives. Korean and European automakers are gaining ground in Ontario. Chinese cars, once dismissed as low quality, may soon enjoy preferential import status if Ottawa follows through on threats to drop existing tariffs. And as for Trump's suggestion that Canada should be the 51st state, it might have been dismissed as hyperbole in past years, but in the current climate, it feels more like provocation. By framing negotiations in terms of dominance rather than mutual benefit, Trump risks alienating not just officials in Ottawa, but ordinary Canadians. What was once dismissed as political theater now feels like a challenge to sovereignty. Behind closed doors, Carney's administration is walking a tightrope trying to avoid open confrontation while preparing for it. Outreach to Washington continues, albeit quietly. At the same time, contingency plans are being drawn up. Trade routes are being reimagined. Diplomacy is being recalibrated. The digital services tax, the original flashpoint, is still technically on hold, not dead. Insiders suggest it could be revived under a broader deal. But for now, it serves as a reminder that power in the global economy is not just about policy, but timing, perception, and narrative control. Trump's 90 Deals in 90 Days campaign, launched with great fanfare, is now running out of steam. His so-called Big Beautiful Bill is stalled in the Senate. Even longtime allies in the business world are starting to publicly question the strategy. Elon Musk's recent critiques only add fuel to a growing fire of discontent. For Canada, this is a defining moment. Will it double down on its legacy relationship with the U.S.? Or will it forge new paths in energy, trade, and diplomacy? The choice may no longer be optional. With U.S. unpredictability rising, Ottawa has little choice but to prepare for a future where bilateral trust is no longer assumed. At its core, this isn't just a trade dispute. It's a stress test, one that's revealing just how fragile the North American economic alliance has become. Trump may have claimed a short-term win, but the long-term consequences are still unfolding. And they may be far more consequential than anyone expected.